Okay, so we can start. Okay, good. Hello, everybody. I'd like to welcome you to the June, July meeting for the Community Facilities District Committee meeting for Altadena Library. Should I start again?
No,
Okay.
we're live streaming.
And as usual, we'd like to open the meeting with a land acknowledgement. The Altadena Library District acknowledges its presence on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded land of the Gabrielino Tongva peoples. Altadena is located on the stolen homelands of the Hahamanga tribal band. The traditional territory of the Gabrielino Tongva is referred to as Tongva, which includes the areas currently known as Los Angeles County, Riverside County, West San Bernardino County, parts of Orange County, as well as 4 southern Channel Islands. Entities such as the U.S. government and non-native settlers have subjected the Gabrielino Tongva people to historic and continuing injustices, including genocide, forced displacement, and cultural and linguistic erasure. Altadena Library commits to learning, educating, and informing its staff and residents of present-day Altadena about the rich histories, vibrant communities, and culture of the Gabrielino Tongva people, present and past, through our collection development, resources, and program development. I'd like to open up with a roll call before we start the meeting. Trustee Lim, here. Member Cauliflower, present, and Trustee Andrews is here. Thank you for that. Is there any reordering of the agenda items that's requested? Okay. Can I get a motion then to adopt the agenda?
I move that we adopt the agenda as submitted.
Second, has been moved and seconded to adopt the agenda. I should start with the roll call. Trustee Lynn.
Aye.
Member Cauliflower.
Aye.
Trustee Andrews is an aye, so thank you for that. And now, is there any public on non-agenda items?
No public comment.
Okay. So moving on to the consent calendar, I'd like to get a motion to approve the minutes of the last meeting held in April 2023.
So second.
And the quick vote, Trustee Lim.
Aye.
Member Cauliflower.
Aye.
And then Trustee Andrews is an aye vote as well. So thank you for that brisk opening, appreciate that. And now we're on to unfinished business, of which there is none. And now we start with new business, an informational item about the cost estimate of the main building project. So I'll turn over to you, Nikki, is that right?
Yeah, okay. So, as I believe the committee is aware, we have a separate subcommittee or ad hoc committee of the board that we refer to as the facilities committee. We meet each week on Monday. 2 of our trustees, Trustee Clark and Trustee Capel, serve on that committee. We meet with our capital project manager, sometimes the architectural team, just depends on what the topic is that week. We've had Doug join us, who's also been helping us find an alternate site. So in the course of the last few months, in working with the capital project manager, Jennifer Pearson, who's joining us today, as well as the architectural team, cost estimates have come in higher than anticipated. So being that the CFD committee has oversight of the bond proceeds and how they're being spent, we wanted to provide an informational presentation to you on where we're kind of at in terms of the building project, the main library building project, and what that means in terms of cost. So in addition to CFD and the facilities committee, we also have what's called the community focus group. So the presentation you're going to see today was presented to that group towards the end of June. It's been about a month, I think, since we met with them. The community focus group has representatives from all of our stakeholder groups in the community, like the town council, historical society, Altadena Heritage, both of our support groups, the Friends and the Foundation, as well as some community member at large. So they have been updated on this as well. So we just thought next natural step would be to take it to this group. But again, we have Jennifer Pearson with us today, as well as facilities committee member and trustee Katie Clark. So Jennifer, if you want to kick us off.
All right, thanks everybody. And good afternoon. I'm going to try to share my screen here. Okay, hopefully everybody can see the presentation there. Just rearrange my screen a little bit here so I can see what I'm doing. Okay, like Nikki said, this is presentation that we gave to the community focus group back on, I believe it was June 20th. So I'm just going to walk you through some high level budget numbers so you can better understand where we are. So funding sources, as you know, we sold bonds in February of last year. Almost $23 million was provided to the project fund out of that bond sale. And at that time, we anticipated that it would be adequate to expand the Bob Lucas Library and renovate the main library without any additions. And we knew that we would need more money if we wanted to expand the main library, so we also applied for a state library grant. Sorry, I'm a little behind on my clicking here. So we were eventually awarded about $7.5 million in grant funds. However, once we received the grant agreement, it became clear that the restrictions on the grant funds and matching funds would reduce the amount we were actually eligible for. The grant also excluded all the exterior accessibility work, and it required that our matching funds be spent on the same scope items as the grant funds, which only covers accessibility, seismic upgrades, window replacement, fire and life safety, and hazardous material remediation. So it doesn't cover any of the additions that we had hoped it could help with, and other work that falls out of those categories. So the way the grant is structured, if we spend this $7.5 million of grant funds, we have to spend another $7.5 million on the same items rather than spending or matching funds on other things. So based on the total scope of the eligible items, we now estimate that we're eligible for only about $4.5 million of those grant funds. So that brings us to a total of almost $27.5 million of what we think is available funding. So now let's look at the project costs. We have soft costs such as architectural fees, surveys, reports, furniture, contingencies. All of that amounts to about $7.5 million. Then the remaining budget goes to construction costs, of which about $2.8 million is set aside for the Bob Lucas branch. And that leaves $17.2 million earmarked for the main library. So this budget was set at the conceptual design phase, and we believed that this budget would cover the renovation as well as the expansion. But now, over the course of schematic design with more detailed drawings and a more defined scope, the new estimate, unfortunately, has come in at $23,241,000, leaving us with a shortfall of about $6 million. So we're looking at reconciliation strategies, and we really see kind of two ways to go forward with this. One is to obtain additional funding, obviously, and the other to reduce the project costs. So looking at potential funding sources, the first thing we thought of was an additional bond sale. Out of the $24 million that we are authorized for under Measure Z, we have $2.875 million that have not been issued. And at the time of this presentation, I think the estimate of the project funds was 2.9 million. I'm not sure if that is still current, but that's what we were told back in June. So we're also applying for round 2 state grant money for the Bob Lucas branch, just over $2 million, and additional state grant funding for the main library. We would have asked for more, except that they have a limit on how much you can ask for one facility. So this brought us to the limit. So all of that totals up to about $7.5 million. So if we did all of these things, we would be in pretty good shape. But we really have no way of knowing what's going to happen with the grant funding. We do know that it's going to be very competitive because they have expanded the eligible items. So it's going to open it up to more libraries. And they also focus on lower income areas. So we're not sure what our chances are, but we will hopefully know by the end of this year whether or not we're getting any additional grant funding. And we're also looking at other fundraising opportunities. And at the same time, we're looking at cost reduction strategies, one to reduce scope, or to select lower cost materials and systems. So our architectural team has taken a hard look at the project and identified some scope reductions and lower cost alternatives. But we needed a way to move forward because time is of the essence. So knowing that our funding situation is not really settled, the bidding environment is hard to predict. So we don't know what that's going to be like on bid day. And like I said, time is of the essence. We don't want to waste any more time and accrue any more escalation, as well as having some expenditure deadlines for the current state grant. So we need to continue moving forward, even though we don't really know what our ultimate funding situation is going to be. So that led us to the idea of bid alternates. So what we're going to do is move forward with a project that has a base bid design that's designed to our current budget. And we will also have a set of additive bid alternates for the scope that falls outside of the budget, so that as we will prioritize those as well. And as we get closer to bid date, we'll have a better idea of how much funding we actually have, and hopefully what the bidding environment is going to be, so that we can prioritize those alternates for the bid package. And that way we can get pricing on those things and decide whether or not we can afford those extra items. So we are moving forward with this strategy. So not wasting any time in design, and we're just looking forward to learning more about the state grant and hopefully getting some money there, and pursuing other fundraising options. And I just wanted to give you all an update on that. Any questions?
I have one on the first round of the funding from California. How are we so far off from the plan? What was the delta? Was it 5 million to 9 million in terms of the scope work?
In terms of what the grant, what we can spend on the grant?
That's right.
Yeah. So it was really just a miscommunication in how the matching funds work for that grant. So we gave them an estimate of what all of our things would cost and an amount that we applied for, and they approved it, even though what they really should have approved was half of what they approved for us, because they require us to match 1-for-1 on the exact same scope items. Whereas we expected to be able to spend our matching funds on other things outside of those specific scope items. we only get to use half of their money, half of our money on that set of scope items.
Is it possible, was everything in that grant like set in stone? Is there any recharacterization that's possible, or is that ship has sailed?
We have asked if they can reconsider some other items. And whether we also asked if the matching could be adjusted. At this time, it does not seem like that's something that they're willing to look at. Maybe Nikki can add on to that because Nikki had those conversations personally.
Yeah, so our grant facilitator, well, first I spoke to someone who's a friend of mine with the state library, because we are pretty sure we can't spend it all. So like, would it make sense, especially as we were gonna apply for second round, to be like, okay, take this amount back that we don't think we're gonna be able to match and spend, so we can ask for more second round. The advice I was given was not to give the money back because we probably won't get it back. So not knowing what the cost is gonna actually be, and when we get to the part of doing the project itself, we're hopeful and that we'll be able to spend more of it than we're anticipating. But really what happened was we did the architectural and design review in 2020. We used those cost estimates to support the grant application. But as Jennifer mentioned, we asked for 9.1 and it was backed up by, we can spend 9.1 on roofing and all the things that Jennifer mentioned, not thinking that if, let's say they gave us 9.1, that we'd have to spend another 9.1 specific to those items,
Same
right?
items.
So they approved us at 7.5 when really we were asking for 9.1 total. So in the review process, like, because we misunderstood the matching part of it. So we got more than we really can spend on those specific parts of the project. Maybe down the road, when it comes time to keep reporting, we can talk a better game about what accessibility can include in other parts of the project, but we just don't feel comfortable saying that's going to happen when it very well may not. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, no, I understand.
The whole thing is being driven though by the fact that things are a lot more expensive now. Items, construction items are a lot more expensive than they were. Is there somebody that's looking at that? Is that flattening that curve, or is it continuing to accelerate? I mean, that's what time really becomes the enemy, is when we're working against the background of a rising curve for materials and so on. So, I mean, even the things that we're doing now might not be enough when we actually break ground and get shovels in the ground a few months from now. So I wonder how you're managing that part of things.
Yeah, we are accounting for escalation. We are keeping track of those costs, and they do seem to be coming down somewhat. It's not quite as volatile as it was. So we are carrying costs for escalation. We do also have other contingencies in place. So we are prepared for costs to rise between now and bid date.
And then a follow-up, another thing that's a headwind for us, from what I understand, is that some of these conditional use permits and authorizations from the county government are slow to materialize. And that, of course, allows all of this inflation to creep into our plan. So
Right.
Can you give us the latest on how things are going regarding those approvals? And if you think they're as important, I guess, as I think they are, because the whole thing needs to be speeded up.
Yeah, so our Bob Lucas project, we submitted that for the CUP about a year ago. So that one has been a real slowly moving process, partly due to staffing changes at the county. So I think we probably had a few months there where nobody was doing anything to look at our project at all. But they're now back on it. We have a new planner assigned who seems eager to help us move things forward. So we're hoping that we will be going to a public hearing. I don't have the schedule in front of me, but I think October or November, if things go according to the schedule that they gave us. They have a certain period of time where other county departments have the opportunity to look at the plans. So that's time we can't rush, and then also the notification period we can't rush. So there's about 2 months of time built in there that we can't do anything about, and the rest is just sort of the back and forth between our design team and the county nailing everything down. So yeah, hopefully by sometime in November at least we'll have that CUP approval, and we're already into the county for the building permit. Ideally, we would do that after we got the CUP, but since time is getting short, they went ahead and submitted that so that we can start getting comments back. As far as the main library, we've started the CUP on that, even though we're still we're just starting design development, so the plans are not really far enough along for the county to review. We've started that process just so we can have conversations about certain things like parking, understanding how they want us to calculate parking so that we can make sure that we can even do what we're trying to do. So we're having those conversations actively, and that's not really, the county's not really delayed on that project. The delay is more to do with funding on the project. So, but things are moving forward now. So we're optimistic that they will continue progressing.
Okay. Great, thank you.
So just to be clear, the recommendation is the bond proceeding? I couldn't tell from our package. So are we requesting that?
No, so I can speak to that a little bit at this point. So the facilities committee spoke with our bond counsel and our advisors, and at this point we're not recommending any action. So we're just wanting to inform you guys of what some potential next steps might be. I mean, in a perfect universe, we could get to a situation where, we have a successful bid that like wraps in a substantial number of alternates and we're able to proceed without any additional funding. Maybe we get some grant money, maybe we don't. So in speaking with our bond counsel, it didn't appear that, absent some major change in market conditions, that there's an urgency to go ahead and sell bonds at this time. As we go further down the line and we have a better sense of what the real shortfall actually will look like, we may want to have that conversation, but we just wanted to let you guys know that that's sort of out there. It's a possibility that's on our radar. And so, of course, because you guys are doing the financial oversight, we wanted to put it on your radar as well. As Jennifer said, hopefully we hear back from those round 2 grants by the end of the year. We're also trying to pursue other avenues. We're reaching out to other, public agencies and elected officials who may have some discretionary spending money that they're able to shunt our way. So we're going to keep aggressively pursuing other options, but at the end of the day, we've tried to prioritize the projects that the community is telling us they really care about, and we're trying to make the numbers work.
Right.
So no recommendation at this time.
Yeah, so right now it's just internal work in terms of prioritization and finding out which pieces can be parsed out as options, assuming we're 7.5 million away, right?
Yeah, so and that part has been done, right? So we've identified a set of, I want to say we've got 6 or 7 at this point, depending on how you categorize some of them. But basically, like, we know that if we like all the, and this is, I should clarify, sorry, just for the record, this is only affecting the main library. The Bob Lucas project in its entirety, totally funded, totally good, no changes there. None of this affects the scope of Bob. This is only about Maine. So with the main library, our base bid that we've kind of lined out, solves all the safety problems, all the accessibility problems, all the, kind of public space reorganization problems. What it doesn't include is like a new community room or that patio on the north side of the building. So we've parsed out those separate pieces, and those are the ad alternates that contractors will be able to bid on. So they may, say, yeah, we can do all of this for, 19.5, who knows, right?
Right.
So we don't wanna forestall somebody's opportunity to submit a very competitive bid that allows us to, you know,
Do
take
everything.
advantage. Yeah, so we've parsed those projects out. It's basically, yeah, the community room, a slightly bigger lobby, north side patio, a meeting room on the main floor, a couple other odds and ends. And so we'll ask the bidders to give us their best pricing on each of those pieces so that we can figure out what makes sort of the most sense. And then we'll have, you know, a sense of where we are in terms of potential shortfall or maybe not.
Okay, and then in terms of timeline, when is the bids, when are the bids supposed to occur? Because I thought we were still in the middle of it, and then how does that play into the second round of the library funding, the California funding? Just the, you know,
Yeah,
where
great
are the
question.
key
Right.
bids?
So for the main library, we're not looking to go into construction until probably October of 24, just based on our estimates of how long the design and the CUP will take, all the approvals. So it will be, you know, in about August of 24 that we'll be bidding the project.
So almost a
So
year
by
from
then
now.
we should definitely know about the state grants, the round 2 grants by then.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, my question was gonna be what Boone already asked about was, whether or not the funds that we do have in place are gonna cover the essentials that we need for this main building, which includes ADA access and all those
Yep,
things.
yep.
I'm hoping to know that that is not getting, that sacrosanct is not being touched, so that's. good to know.
Correct. Yeah, correct. Everything that is not included in the base bid is what I would characterize as a nice to have, not a have to have. You know, there are things that we've identified as essential, like people have to be able to access the library. They have to be able to get safely from Mariposa to, you know, the bridge, like all of those moving pieces. The windows have to be safe. The HVAC has to be upgraded. The roof has to be, you know, all of that is in the base bid. Everything that's an ad alternate is very firmly in the, it would be great if we're able to do this. And that would be really cool. I would like to be able to, but we're gonna have, you know, even if we're able to do none of it, we would have an incredible facility that's much more accessible, much more functional, much safer, and much more usable in terms of its public space layout than what we have now.
Yeah, and if you go back to the original impetus for doing this to begin with, it was that deferred maintenance estimate that we got.
Yep.
Remember,
Yep.
in our terms, in that 11 million, something like that. So, and that was the basis that we were trying for at the time, just to get and get it covered well. So I
Yeah.
was happy to know that those basics are being done.
Absolutely. Yeah, those essentials are all covered. And it's, you know, we're really trying to get as much mileage as we possibly can out of every dollar that the taxpayers have authorized for us. We want to go as, you know, we want to get as much bang for their buck as we can manage, but we also, as you said, we want to make sure that all of those essentials that we identified as core project priorities are covered.
So this is you're just kind of warning us right now about.
Yeah, this is just a heads up.
Okay, good.
Yep.
Any other questions?
No,
All right. No. Thanks a lot for the presentation.
Yep, thank you.
So moving on here. We've gone through the informational processing of the main building. And Nikki, are we on now 5B?
Yeah.
The CFD education. And you have a presentation lined up for this one then too?
Not a presentation. If you want to refer to your package, we are providing the updated capital or CFD bond proceed financials. They're actually through the end of May because we originally had the reports prepared for a July 12th meeting. So some of the highlights that I wanted to point out is that we have invested the bond proceeds that were deposited into the project fund with the help of our municipal advisor as well as US Bank. These investments have generated almost $130,000 in interest income since investment activities began, and that's through the end of May. So it would be even more interest income since then. We've only expended about $880,000. Obviously, most of what we've spent is on our capital project management, advising, as well as the architectural firm. That number will grow substantially once we finally start moving into construction. So the balance of the bond project fund as of May 31st is $22,104,158. And then, oh, we were supposed to say what these do. We need to remember to do that next time. So as you can see on the second page, these are the different, and the last time it was recommended that we put in the report what these firms are doing, what type of work they're doing for us. So we'll make sure to do that next time. But if you have specific questions, I can answer. Most of the money that's been spent, as you can see, has been with Anderson Brule Architect, which is our architectural firm, as well as Rackland Partners, which is our capital project management firm. Let's see, Epic LA, that's the system where we're paying for permits through the county. Most of that $25,000 has gone to the conditional use permit, as well as certificates of compliance for both libraries. The reimbursement from the Altadena Library District was, and I think we shared this at the last meeting, until we got the bond proceeds, we were fronting all the costs. So that was to reimburse us for those costs. And then let's see, I-Bailey is also, that was very little from them, but we are accounting separately for the work that our accounting firm is doing to track not only the financials to share with this group as well as the board related to the CFD and the bond proceeds, but also helping us track all of the very specific information that we need for the grant reporting. So like right now we're working on finalizing the grant report for Q2 of 2023 to submit. And that includes staff time. So we're having to track like the meetings that we're attending, who's there and what that cost is per hour for myself, for Jonathan, our facilities manager, for David, my IT manager, as well as those administrative costs for capital project management, architectural review. And then we have to do it by percentage because it can only be the parts of the project that the scope covers. So I-Bailey's been wonderful in helping us track that because it's a lot of extra work to make sure we're able to accurately report back to the state. So there is a snapshot of the bond proceeds on the last page of the report. As mentioned, the ending balance as of May 31st, it was $22,104,158. I do have Christy Even hanging out on Zoom if you guys have any specific questions that I'm not able to answer. So happy to try to answer those, and I promise next time we will make a note of what each of those vendors does related to the project, so you know.
So in terms of the library district repayment, was that for expenditure in FY21 then, or early 22? Which?
No, it was for last fiscal.
So it was 22.
22.
Right. And then, so is there a separate sheet that talks about where the actual breakout from the library funds went to? For the actuals that the companies are receiving, right? Because we kind of don't care if it's a pass-through at some point. And it's probably more relevant if we understand what the totals from each organization is getting.
Christy, are you there?
I'm here. I'm not sure I understand the question though. I'm following the list. What are you asking be broken out?
For the library district, the 267K, where did that go to for these vendors,
Yeah.
right? As long as that exists somewhere, so that we
It does
don't.
exist, and I'm happy to add that. I'm happy to add that as well. A lot of that was bond issuance. Well, a lot of it was administrative stuff, I think, in the beginning, but there were some other expenses. I do have a breakout of that. I'm happy to provide that. I can't tell you what it is right now, but I can find it. Because before it was all in place, you're right, Altadena, the library was paying it just right out of their checking account, and then they were reimbursed. So yes, can I get that for you for a later time, or it can even be emailed to you? I
Yeah.
also made note, Nikki, to include descriptions. So if we break that one out and add the descriptions, you'll get that in the next report.
Yeah, and it might be like totally separate, but I think, you know, the repayment is done. It
Yeah.
was just, it's fine. We just need to know what the.
What
true
it was
cost-
for? Sure,
Thanks.
not a problem.
Yep, as Christy mentioned, I believe the bond issuance itself cost about 180,000.
Mhm.
So much of that, 267,000 went to like our municipal advising, our bond underwriter, bond counsel, as well as the CFD administration firm. But I would assume the rest was pretty much to Racklin and the architects, but yeah, we could break that out for you.
Will do.
And I will also note, a question was raised, so we've reinvested or moved almost all of our money into class, which is a new fund that was developed. We're earning anywhere between 5 and 5.5% interest at any given time with the money that's sitting in there. So a question was raised if we could invest some of the bond proceeds over there because it's a higher interest rate than it's making right now, Christy, right? Yeah. So I did reach out to my contact at class. He believes that is the case, but next step for me is to reach out to our bond counsel just to make sure that that is the case. And then we'll make a decision about whether or not to move that money over. We did get an email today that with the latest interest rate rise, it's actually going to be higher. So I'll work closely with IBLE as well as our municipal advisor and then, you know, advise this committee on if and when we decide to make that move.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an extraordinarily good rate of return, actually, in this day and age, and that's the thing that makes me a little nervous, is how long can they keep that up without some hiccup going on, and the money's pretty liquid too, is
It's
that?
very liquid.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I'm a big fan of it, honestly. Like when we had our money, most of our money sitting with the county, it took anywhere from 5 to 10 business days. And I had to send a certified trust warrant and all of this. With class, all I have to do is log in. And then if I get a transfer in by noon, I think, or 11 a.m., I have it by the next day.
Okay,
So it's really, really easy to access as well.
yeah, thanks for that, for bringing that to the board, that whole opportunity, because I think it really has worked out.
Yeah, we're making a lot of money in interest. Because we also have that state grant. We got half of the money given to us up front. So that 3.87 or whatever it is, I put in a separate fund in class, and it's also making a lot of interest sitting there.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah, and then at one point we were over 4 million in class. Now, because we're in that time of the tax year where we're not going to be getting very much out of the county, we'll have to transfer money out of class, but we keep as much in it as we possibly can, just enough out to pay the bills and make sure payroll's happening, because it is making so much interest.
Yeah,
Yeah. So I want to see if we can do the same thing with the bond proceeds. So we'll let you know.
okay, yeah, you'll let us know about that.
Mhm, mhm. Any other questions about the financials?
No.
All right, thank you, Christy. I asked her like last second to join us today. All right, so yes,
So now we're to 5C, is that right?
correct.
And really, it hasn't changed much at all, right, from the last version of this that we saw?
Okay, okay, so, we saw this resolution back in April. So just a little backstory, and I apologize, I didn't have a report. We'll include that when we take it to the board next week, but the board agreed last summer to use the previous year's square footage numbers to be able to generate the rate, so that we could do this as part of the budget process each year. I don't know if you recall, but Christine Drazel, who is our CFD administrator with NDS, let us know that if the numbers were substantially different, we would have to bring it back to the board. Well, they were substantially different enough that we had to generate a new resolution, and the rates are just a tiny, tiny bit different. So I guess we should have included the old rates, but for the single family residential property, the approved rate that we took to the board was 0.048, not 0.049. So just minorly different, but again, something that we had to bring to get approved so that we filed with the county. The deadline is August 10th, which is what makes this really time sensitive because I don't think NBS got the rates until like mid-July. So again, we'll keep an eye on it. If we feel like next year this happens again, we may just say, you know what, we'll set the rates ahead of the county deadline and make sure that we take it to both the CFD committee and the board, but that's where we're at and why we're having to have this resolution brought before you. Hopefully voting to recommend that the board approve this on Monday at their special meeting. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Okay,
So basically, our this today.
is to make a recommendation.
Yeah,
to the board.
it's very, I didn't even catch the thousandth of a cent or whatever changes you got in there.
Well, and interestingly, it actually went down that thousandth of a cent. Last year's rate was 0.049,
Uh-huh,
so it went down slightly, and now it's back up to the rate that it was
Okay.
for this current fiscal, well, the past fiscal year.
well. Is there any more discussion about this? Can I get a motion then to approve this,
The recommended,
recommend this, I should say, to the full board at our next meeting? Second, okay. Do a roll call. Aye. Aye, Christina. And an aye for so it's unanimous approval for the recommending this.
Okay.
And with that. Are there any proposed future agenda items that someone would like to mention? I don't have anything. I have one that I'd like to mention to you, Nikki, and that would be getting a little bit more information, a little bit sort of a mini report on what the community, with the feedback that we might be getting from the community regarding the number of low income exemptions that we're getting and just managing the taxes now as they roll out on a community basis to find out, what we can find out regarding what the people think about it, what if any hardships are they causing the people, et cetera. I think that would be worth a conversation in this committee and then pass on our thoughts to the full board about what we might be finding. But I kind of think of it as our job to do here is to see how these taxes roll out and how they're affecting the community.
okay,
We'll define, and maybe you and I could actually have a meeting together to talk about what elements would go into it, but I think it could be useful going forward.
okay.
That's my suggestion about future items.
Okay. Yeah, I can report because I had to ask Christine this week already. Last year, there were approximately 100 exemptions that were filed and granted. This fiscal year, because the deadline was June 30th, there's about 60. So that number went down, but we'll talk about what you want that to include.
Okay,
Mhm.
all right, can I, if there's no further discussion, can I get a motion to adjourn? Okay, and I will declare this meeting adjourned for. Am I reading glasses?
3:46.
3:46. There you go. Thanks, everybody.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you all. Well, I guess it might be gone, our presenter, but that was a very good presentation.
Yes, lots of moving parts.
Yeah. So I don't know how it works. When are the presentations included as part of the budget and when